Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. Back once again with another review of the 6 matches which took place in the Scottish Premiership this last weekend, as we had something of a derby special. And helping me to talk through all of that is Mr. Tony Anderson. Tony, how are you?
Yes, Fowler, I'm good, thanks. I had my first driving lesson today.
How was that?
Not my favourite experience, I would probably say. Very tense leg I suffered from while I was doing it. I did get behind the wheel of the car. It's the first time I've ever done that in my entire life. But the guy seems to be relatively patient, which is good. But I ended up on the curb and driving, like scraping his car off twigs and stuff, driving past because we're up at Turnhouse in Edinburgh. So I think there's a long way to go. So frankly, luckily I bought 16, but we'll see how we get on.
Yes, best of luck with that. I can't think of a link of you driving into the Dundee derby. So I'll just say
it'd be as chaotic. There you go.
Okay, yeah, it's chaotic as Dundee United's first half performance in the Dundee derby. How about that? Right, let's go to this game first, because this game, yes, Rangers defeated Celtic at Celtic Park, obviously, and that's huge news, but I mean, in the context of the SPFL season, the Premiership season, or both, that doesn't do an awful lot to things. But what is affected by a result on Saturday is both of Dundee and Dundee United's fortunes, because that is Dundee finally getting themselves a victory. And what a victory to get at the home of your rivals, which lifts them 4 points clear of St Johnstone at the bottom of the table, just a point behind Killie now in 10th, and safety without even having to worry about defeating the likes of Airdrie or Livingston or Partick Thistle in a playoff final. And Tony, this is the first of 2 games where I think it's fair to say, well, the first of 2 games we're talking about, but the second of 2 games on Sunday where the away team dominated the first half in a manner that I don't think anybody saw coming beforehand.
Yeah, I'd say this is possibly the standout day of the Scottish Premiership this season.
Yeah,
and part of that is just the obvious part of the actual games were brilliant. But like you said, is they neither went the way that you expected whatsoever, and the away teams battered the home teams in the first half, and both times the home teams were pretty lucky it wasn't actually more, and they weren't completely out of the game, especially in this one. I don't think I've seen a team dismantle and put them, especially like the style of team Dundee United are. They've rarely looked, they've been quite boring, Dundee United, I think would be a fair thing to say, and they've been really solid, and they've churned it out, and they've looked really, really hard to beat and hard to play against. Never have we seen anyone put them into this sort of scenario where they just look like they'd never even met each other, the Dundee United players. And some of the signings of the season, like Will Ferry, looked like they'd never seen a football before in their entire lives. I did see, but you see this nonsense all the time, some rumours online that there was a sickness bug at Tannadice for the Dundee United players.
Yeah, there's sickness bug talk. There's talk that neither Ferry nor Ross Graham or Declan Gallagher were properly fit as well, like all kind of carrying injury stuff. But I mean, it's a lot of kind of conjecture when you're seeing whispers of it, and it's not Goodwin coming out and saying, "No, this actually happened. Mm-hmm. This is what we're dealing with during the week." Then I don't know. I'm personally happy to put that to one side and just go off of the back of what we saw on the park. And to me, it was down to 3 things. It was down to, I think, Dundee with a change of shape. Mm-hmm. As we've said recently, Tony Docherty's insistence of always returning to 3 at the back is causing Dundee major problems. And so it was a 4 at the back in this game as they lined up in a 4-3-3. I think it was also Dundee United's woes, which we'll get to soon enough. And most importantly, it was some huge performances from experienced key players in the Dundee side. So Simon Murray has done it for the entire season, but what was most important was that they got a great performance out of Joe Shaughnessy at the back. Mm-hmm. They've still been conceding, they still don't keep clean sheets, and they still didn't in this one, but the defence has looked better with Shaughnessy back in the team. He is an experienced player in them, he's a very good communicator, and throughout his entire Scottish football career, he's been somebody who's both been dependable and aggressive at the back. He was huge. You also had Mo Silla.
Yeah, I was gonna come on to Silla because this is the best performance I've seen for him in months, maybe even this season. I find with Silla, it's kind of he'd be the type of player that, depending on what periods you've watched Dundee, as a fan of another club, some people think he's absolutely brilliant, and others will think he's absolutely hopeless because it feels like it's either sort of feast or famine with Silla. Because like today, in this game, he totally dominated, and Savelji has been a brilliant player for Dundee United. It looked like one of their best signings, but Silla totally ran the show in there, and it was maybe really smart. I don't think everyone, you're saying the change of shape, but the fact that it brought Mulligan into the midfield with Silla and with Lyle Cameron, it just like suddenly you've got just like so much legs, and I think that told so much in the way that they were able to completely swarm and suffocate Dundee United and never give them a minute. So I really like the look of seeing Mulligan, who's had a really good season, even when Dundee were looking maybe a bit poorer, even when he was playing right wing back. People were starting to think maybe that's where Mulligan is going to build his career. But in this one, I thought Mulligan and Silla looked absolutely brilliant in the engine room together. Just I really like what we'd always say, that's a Scottish football central midfield. When you saw them two putting together, you imagine them having, with those attributes and physical abilities, having a really, really good bit of camaraderie and actually doing well in quite a lot of games playing in there together.
So, Mulligan, I think the thing with Mulligan is that he showed in flashes in different positions this season that he can be very good. It's just trying to get the consistency with him, and that consistency then leading to him nailing down a position in any one spot, which has been his kind of weakness so far, as he's continuously been moved around the Dundee side, whether it be the right side of the fence, the right side of midfield, or in centre midfield. But I was going to mention Mulligan because he'd done a good job against Ferry, who, as you mentioned earlier, was absolutely hopeless and probably the worst performance he's put in a Dundee United shirt. But it also was helped by the performance of the man behind him, which was Jordan McGee. Again, another player in the same old as Silla, who's not been performing well of late. McGee was a huge player for Dundee earlier in the season.
And last season,
yeah, just regardless of where they're playing him, somebody who's you can rely on to go in there and do your job. But since he came back from injury earlier this year, he had been struggling and hadn't been playing well. So for him to put in the show, and he did, getting 2 of the goals as well, but just constantly getting forward. Not only that, but also getting forward and helping Mulligan to pin back Ferry, but also in dealing quite easily with Ferry and Trapanovsky on the defensive side. Trapanovsky scored, but he was pretty shit other than that, and continually kind of shut out of trying to even take on McGee, and instead constantly went inside and slowed down Dundee United's play.
And you think the way that Dundee United were set up with Strain and Ferry and Middleton and Trapanovsky, that should work. You've got the 2 wide players that probably want to come inside a bit more, and then 2 fullbacks, and Ferry especially, who's got maybe a bit more legs than Strain, where Strain's more about his sort of football ability and his crossing ability. But for Strain, it's just never happened in a Dundee United shirt. And as I said, with Middleton in front of him, yeah, that wide area maybe lacks pace, but it's got a lot of quality. You think they'd be able to link really well together. And outside of the goal that Middleton scored, I didn't really feel like much came of there. Even though, again, like when you look at elements of that team, you think that should work. That makes complete sense.
I think the thing I would say about the United team, which I don't think they did get right, was that was actually just probably too attacking. Now, if you're playing Dundee at home and you've not had a victory in a while, then you maybe want to go out and go for the jugular right away. But Trapanovsky and Middleton and 2 very attacking fullbacks, you're then leaving yourself exposed, and which I think happened many times when you lose the ball. When you lose the ball kind of towards your own goal, or when you are counter-attacked on, then anybody who's advanced from the centre of the park will probably be caught out of position because you've just got so many bodies that have gone forward. Because Strain and Ferry, the way those kind of wide players would work, because they're each on the opposite flank from their stronger foot in terms of the wide players of Trapanovsky and Middleton. So they're doing that so that the fullbacks go beyond them to provide the width. But that means you're definitely having like 4 guys at the top end of your park every time you go forward. And they just couldn't. It just left far too much space. Anytime Dundee broke on them, there was like so many Dundee bodies swarming on the United defence. And not only did they score 3 goals in that first half, but they also had 2 disallowed, and 2 disallowed that kind of, one of them was well offside, but there were 2 that like nobody really saw coming, and United were lucky to get away with.
Yeah, they were offside, but it had no impact on the fact that the goal happened. It was really early on the move. Nobody really noticed it. And that, because even if Murray had been onside when the long ball went on, I still think he would have got that ball. He was in that much space. So I don't think it material, like on another day, those just count and nothing's changed. And those goals just go in. But it was interesting to go back to Shaughnessy. I mean, it's a big ask. Like Dalby, especially 3 weeks ago, he'd be licking his lips at this game, thinking about playing Dundee. You think like he's like the archetype, worst type of player for this Dundee team to come up against. But he was just being forced to. You saw pretty early that he decided, I'm not going to hang around with Joe Shaughnessy, and he spent the rest of the time trying to sort of pair up against Donnelly, but he was really, really quiet. They couldn't get him into the game sort of whatsoever. And I loved if we could get to are we okay to go to the goals now?
Yeah, aye, of course.
That we're talking about the Dundee United fullbacks being really attacking, but we get to see the goal that Dundee score with Larakesh getting to the byline and sort of digging out a pretty high looping cross. And Jordan McGee, wow, the technique and how deliberate it was, and he got a bit ahead of it because the cross was in the air for quite so long. It was probably quite difficult to sort of manoeuvre his body to make that work, but it's absolutely tremendous. And I'd go as far to say it's my favourite header of the season, to be honest. It was brilliant, man. It was absolutely flying.
It is a very good header. I thought you were going to go straight to goal number 2 and focus on the absolute shocker from Walton in the Dundee United goal.
Well, let's go there then. Let's go there then.
Yeah.
He just made a really good save before it from Lyle Cameron, where it's like real. I thought that was in all the way. Those ones that go through the player's legs, they're unsighted, and it just goes into the bottom corner. So he done really, really well for that. And then, I mean, Walton's been one of the best goalkeepers in the league this season, but that is a horror show.
Again, I think it says a lot about the standard of goalkeeping in this league at this point in time. Because he's probably going to in fact, Joel and myself are going to do the first.
The top 10 or something.
The first top 10 goalkeepers, and I think Walton's probably going to end up in, just off the top of my head, he's probably going to end up in the top half, or I think as most years he would struggle to get in the top 10. But it's not great for custodians around the Scottish Premiership at this point in time. But is there any other goal you want to concentrate on before? I just want to talk about United and their kind of spiralling form before we move on. But is there anything else? Well, actually, we should.
Middleton's goal. I mean, Middleton's goal is just an absolute peach. It's like it's one of those pure strikes because he hits it with his instep, but it's still hit with like absolute venom, and it sort of crashes into the top corner. So that's like a really, really high quality strike. And this is another thing about how bad this was for Dundee United. That's exactly what they needed, and you don't get that. You don't get that every week. So for them to be in a situation like this at home against a Dundee team who are like spiraling, and they're in an absolute death spiral. Dundee, and for them to manage to sort of take advantage of some pretty poor defending out wide and manoeuvre to get Middleton into the sort of the place he's dying to get into, and he produces quality like that, and for that to basically have zero effect on the game is worrying from a Dundee United perspective.
Yeah, not only that, but even the second goal. I mean, it's a good chance, and it's a chance they should be scoring and ultimately do score. But that ball's not ended up in the back of the net unless it takes a deflection. It doesn't, like Chaparowski's shot is not a good one, and the deflection takes it past the goalkeeper. And I wonder whether that part in it and that kind of almost desperation caused Goodwin to lose his mind with 10 minutes to go, when he took off both these centre halves, replaced him with one centre half who was just a bit quicker, but also like an attacking player. And just properly went for it and just basically left Adebayo by himself, kind of thing. He looked like a walking red card within about 5 minutes of coming on. It was like he was just
not a terribly good player anyway. Never mind if you leave him completely exposed.
And yeah, just too exposed at the back, and then ultimately leads to the penalty, the red card, and then Simon Murray's celebration as well, which is brilliant. See him doing the Adebayo, having early in the game being hit by a vape thrown from the home end. At least I think he was hit by it. He certainly brought it to the referee's attention, and then former Dundee United player as well, just streaking from one end right down the other and doing the big knee slide in front of the home support. Terrific stuff.
Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, vapes the new lighters in football is the most commonly thrown item onto the pitch. But the thing is, if the guy's getting himself really stressed out, then surely, like, oh, he'll be regretting throwing his vape away after it.
He needs that nicotine rush to bring him down a bit.
Guy's like, actually puts his hand up. It was me. Can't have it back and I'll leave. I enjoyed, like, you're mentioning about Goodwin go wild with the subs. Two very, very different managers in the way they dealt with their substitutes bench over the game, with Goodwin losing his marbles and Dundee totally Dockery just basically forgetting that his bench even existed, even when the game completely sort of swung and Dundee were kind of hanging on and looking a bit tired at points. He just kept on refusing. It's like he was too engrossed in the game and just totally forgot that he had players that he could possibly bring on at other points. But just to finish it with Dundee, it's just when you looked at the lineups again, and like you say, when you boil it down, like, there is loads more legs in that Dundee team. You can like the Dundee United team is quite slow. Like, even the wide players are slow. Like you say there, who want to come inside. Even Wright Strain as a fullback is slow. Gallagher and Graham, they're slow. Alan Campbell's got a bit of energy, but they seem to be using him almost as a second forward, maybe. I found that Campbell's role to be quite weird. And
they've what I was going to say about United before we finished is that the January window just seems to have absolutely killed them. Like, not only did it start with, I mean, Kevin Holt left after the end of the January window because it was the Irish league was still open, but his kind of impending departure kind of threw them off. He's been a big miss at the back. They've not been as solid in there since he left. But even the guys they brought in, Campbell has been pish. Like, he's got the energy to run up and down, but he does so
half the player he was.
And he also does so in a way that sometimes leaves him a bit exposed and behind because his positioning's not been great. And the kind of ability that he had on the ball that he built up and throughout his years in Motherwell, where you could see him getting better and better as a footballer and as a kind of box-to-box midfielder, that seems to have gone. Like, I don't know whether just
don't see any dribbling or drive with like ball carrying at all.
It seems to be that getting kind of disposed of by Luton when they went up to the Premier League in England, which is fair enough that he's not at the standard of that level, but it seems like that rejection has really kind of sapped his confidence, because United were warned about this when he signed, and that he'd gone to Charlton prior to this and had not done much at all in England's League One, but he kind of thought, get him back, home comforts, he's performed in this league before, this is exactly what he needs to get his career back on track, and it's not worked at all, and he's playing in every single game due to his reputation and due to the fact that probably on the training pitch he still looks class and better than some of his teammates, but it's not working out at all.
And it'll be a high salary as well.
You must think so.
Yeah, but there was always that, and this isn't disrespect to Dundee United as well, but you think Campbell's that good, Hearts, Aberdeen, Hibs offer more money than what Dundee United do.
Yeah.
I know that's it's not always the case, but you do really feel like a player like that, who you felt would be really sought after, it just didn't seem to really come to any fruition. He just seemed to turn up at Dundee United with Harry Payton, who looks like he's every bit a lower league Scottish footballer than in the top flight, because they brought him in as a fast striker. He's slow as fuck.
Harry Payton plays for Motherwell.
They're fucking one of the Paytons.
And even like and Fiorini as well, who seems to be getting more opportunities than Babinski, and Babinski's not been good
Where is
this
Babinski?
season.
What's happened to Babinski?
He was an unused sub in this one. He's not been great either, but he's done more than either a Campbell or Fury have in a Dundee United shirt, and maybe have just been cast to the side a little too early due to that. Anyway, let's move on though, because we've done nearly 20 minutes of one game.
I'm sorry, but they've lost anaemic. I think Ross Graham got himself sent off.
No, that apparently that was an error.
Right, okay. And Declan Gallagher, so you're linking they've in such horrible form, it could be a spiral for Dundee United. Could they be the ones that could they even miss out on the top six, fella? Is that something that could happen?
That would be Raj, considering where they were in January. But it's been a season of that. It's been a season of long runs for teams, some good, some bad.
Yeah.
And United might have two in the same season, similar to Hibs and Hearts and Aberdeen. Right, let's move on to our next game. The other derby, which took place on Sunday, earlier kick-off at Celtic Park. Celtic 2, Rangers 3. And as I said, with the Dundee game, a match where the visiting team dominated the first period in a manner that nobody would have expected. Celtic just constantly struggling to play it out of defence. Even when they did manage to do so in the middle of the park, they were static, uninspiring, and the forward players didn't really have any spark to them before maybe 5-10 minutes before the half. And Rangers just kept coming with, just constantly kept, well, they went for them right at the start. And I think that was like I wonder if that was a conscious decision based on Ferguson's kind of thinking of, well, this is Rangers against Celtic. This is what we need to be. We can't be afraid of them, so let's go out and show it. Mm-hmm. Or thinking that we're going to have to punch them in the mouth early because we're going to get knackered later on, which is eventually what happened. But after that, they go a goal up. Terrific leap and header from Nico Raskin. And then it just looked like the team going to get the second goal was going to be Rangers because they just kept winning the ball in advanced areas and continually breaking. And any time they'd done so, they looked dangerous. And Celtic didn't at all. And that was just wild, considering what we thought was going to happen coming into the game. Even after Rangers getting through against Fenerbahce, you still thought, especially due to playing 120 minutes on Thursday night, that this was going to be a very different kettle of fish, and it wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, I just thought we were going to get the same that we just had. Rangers on a Thursday night. Doesn't matter who's the manager. It's the way it is. I could turn up and manage Rangers on a Thursday night, and somehow it would conspire that Rangers get through or win in grounds that you would never expect them to, etc. But fair play. I mean, you have to give Barry Ferguson credit, even if you're still not entirely sure exactly what of his ability to be the Rangers manager.
The conversation is starting already, obviously, because they've now had, I mean,
two huge away wins. Yeah.
But the thing is, I don't think this is necessarily that different to what we've been used to with this Rangers team. So yeah, winning at Celtic Park is obviously different. First time they've done that with fans in the ground since 2019. Mm-hmm. Like when it just before New Year 2020. And so that's huge, and that's something that didn't happen before. But Clement did play Celtic quite well in the majority of his games. And like you say, Rangers in Europe on a Thursday, it's just been a thing that's been continued on. I think for me with Ferguson, now obviously because he's had he's had a mixed start, it has to be said overall, but he's done a couple of things that I don't think a lot of people saw coming. So obviously it's naturally going to be talked about. Does he get the manager job? Should he be in consideration for it? For me, I think it's a bit pointless in having this conversation until the end of the season. And the reason for that is that, yeah, winning against away to Celtic isn't something that Rangers have done recently. But Rangers have played well against Celtic recently. And in this game, it's maybe just a case, if you look back at some of the other matches, Celtic didn't score at times where, say if Celtic had got a goal back before half-time and then had managed to get one early into the second period, that completely changes the outcome of the game. So Sterling getting back, for instance, to clear Maeda's one when it looked to be heading in, that's a big moment that maybe in one of those other matches didn't go the way of Rangers, and that's really the difference at the end between it. What I think is the key test for Ferguson, and what already shown a bit kind of suspect to beating, is that realistically Rangers have been competitive in games against Celtic and they've been good in Europe. Yeah. What they've been bad at is beating the so-called bread and butter
and going away from home and doing it, really.
Yeah, doing it away from home, doing it consistently. And that's what he needs to do to really put himself into contention between now and the end of the season, is to win the vast, vast majority of those games.
Comfortably.
Pretty much win every single one of them, except maybe Celtic at Ibrox. And even then, he probably can't lose it, because then that would mean that he wouldn't be a popular choice. So I still think we need to wait a bit before really getting into the should Ferguson get the job chat.
Absolutely. And I think it's he's changed the shape, which I think people were pretty surprised about.
Yeah.
But I think he should be commended for certain parts of it, because I like parts of it. But again, Rangers should be able to switch between a couple. This team is built more as an underdog team. It's very unlike, and I'll like players like Raskin, for example, excel massively playing in a team of this style. For example, and I'm going to come on to Raskin because I really really like Nico Raskin in general. But I did like some of the parts of it. I think he gets a lot more playing the back three and having Sterling in beside Tavernier. I think is really smart. because Tavernier's still one of Rangers' best attacking outlets, but he was struggling to have the ability to get up and down like he had in previous seasons. So basically, we're putting Sterling in that back three behind Tavernier. It's basically putting Rangers' fittest, quickest player in behind Tavernier and using, and maybe possibly negating some of what Sterling is possibly good at, but again, just balancing out that right-hand side and allowing Rangers to get more out of still one of their, as I said, better attacking players. And Tavernier, the back three suits Suter massively in terms of how he gets to play his football. He borderline became the playmaker in this game. His passing was brilliant, and I think most people would agree, be it for Scotland, even at Hearts, at times that Suter always looks really, really, really good in a back three. So I think that, again, another example of Ferguson coming in. He obviously watched Rangers a lot, being just a Rangers guy before he took the job. And then straight away, he's managed to get more out of those two players. Dessers playing up front and having a partner, I think, suits him. And Diamande as well. Diamandi's got less work to do going backwards, and he can look at more of his attacking side of it, where he's got, and obviously with Barron, I know he's not everyone's cup of tea, and certainly not Ewan Taylor's cup of tea, but with Barron and Raskin in there, it's just so much energy that allows, like, maybe the players with a bit more quality, which is Diamande and Cherny, to concentrate on just being further forward and actually try to create chances. And that Barron and Raskin, without McGregor in there, Engels couldn't cope with the energy that Rangers midfield, and Engels was terrible.
Yeah, and he also had kind of Diamande sitting on him quite a lot as well, which is something that Clement done in the last game when he had Bajrami doing it to McGregor. And that does seem to work against Celtic in terms of trying to... But
Hibs, I mean, loads of teams have done it against Hibs. I mean, I remember Hibs done it with Dylan Venti against Callum McGregor last year, and Hibs got a draw in that game. So it's no surprise again in this that without McGregor, Celtic are quite a lot worse. And I think that answers that question we always laugh. Why does McGregor never, ever, ever, ever get to rest? That's why. Because they're just seem that they lose about 20% of their ability to sort of just control games. It all looks so much more chaotic because with McCowan, Engels and Atati, it's just loads of football. It's loads and loads of like really easy on the eye, good attacking players, very creative players, but it didn't have much structure to it at all.
Yeah.
Especially going up against, like you're saying, a Rangers team like Barron and Raskin, who are, again, probably not anywhere near the players of that level, but they're certainly going to ask you 100 questions and never give you 1 second on the ball. And if you're disorganised, then they're going to take full advantage.
Is Nico Raskin not in the Belgian squad instead of Engels? Am I right in saying that?
Yes.
So, there's probably some other reason that I'm not understanding. So I don't want to get some angry messages. But I think it does show that Nico Raskin he's somebody that this season I think it's finally all came together for him. He first came into the Rangers team. He initially looked really good, but it didn't last really. Injuries have been a bit of an issue. He's been in and out of the team, but this is a campaign where he's really managed to finally. It took a while as well. It wasn't a case that it was at the start of the season, but he's finally managed to cement himself as a kind of proper first pick in this Rangers team and somebody who they can actually rely on to be one of the better players each and every game.
Yeah, and the thing about Raskin is I think sometimes he's a bit of an all-rounder. He's an all-action midfielder, and he can do things at both sides, which he'll come on to. But I think a lot of the time, in previous iterations of Rangers, that he seemed to plug gaps. He got shunted around to suit other players, like Barron, for example, where Raskin would end up playing at the 6, so Barron could play in a different position. Whereas with Raskin, he's got absolutely everything you would want in an all-action midfielder. And we all know the obvious stuff, like he's a Rottweiler, snap at everyone's heels. I mean, early in the season, one of my favourite performances for a non-Hibs player was Raskin at Ibrox against Spurs, where I thought he was like tremendous. He was absolutely everywhere. And now since Ferguson's come in, he seems to we seem to be seeing more from Raskin in an attacking sense. He seems to be allowing him to get forward, which culminated in sort of like an incredible pass for Czerny's goal in Turkey for the 3-1 game, and then in this game here, scoring the little header, which was really cute. But then for Diamandi's goal, that's smart play. That's really, it's not easy at all. He needs to judge it all perfectly, get over. So we're now seeing him coming into the last third. And personally, whoever takes over at Rangers, I would be with Raskin at 24. He's totally purpose built for this league, as well as when Rangers are going to be playing Europe, where half the time they are going to be sort of the underdogs, and they're going to have to be tactical in the way they play. And he's 24 on all action. I'd be looking at building my team around Raskin, whether whoever takes that role on next season.
And yeah, so the match went that the Rangers were leading 2-0 at half time. Celtic got themselves back in it through Maeda, and then Hatate who didn't have a great performance, but a very nice finish for the equalising goal. You think there's only going to be one winner, but no, Rangers, who hadn't really done anything since going 2-0 ahead, because you could kind of see that they knew Celtic would have cut them at them. I think they initially wanted to keep things tight and not concede in the opening 10-15 minutes. That didn't happen. That therefore put them a bit further on the back foot. And tiredness was just going to be a factor after Thursday. But they take advantage of some poor Celtic defending. Igamani with a rifled finish into the top corner. Glad to see that there was finally away fans back in this fixture, so that when a moment like that happens, the striker could go and celebrate in front of his own fans, kind of thing, because that is something that was missing and shows you how. I mean, I'm not going to say how pathetic both of them were, because it was Rangers' fault for just being annoyed that Celtic were winning at Ibrox all the time, and there was too many Celtic fans there having a good time. But they managed the first game for fans back. Great to see. And speaking of fans, and great to see, Vaclav Černý spraying the Celtic fans with water as he celebrated the goal with Celtic fans. Understandably in the area, by the way, because if it happened to me, I would be fucking furious and all. But the reaction for them was also very funny.
This is one of those that I don't know what I'm meant to say as someone who goes on the BBC. What? Like 5 years ago, I would be going off on, but it's funny. It's just a simple thing. I watched it, and how fast it happens when you watch the looped video, when it just keeps on coming, and it takes you like 3 to notice what actually happens. And then it is so funny just watching it, like a Benny Hill thing, just over and over and over, fast as anything. Czerny, spray, seeing it get the guy directly on him. But it's a dodgy thing to do. But
it was a bit, I mean,
it's very dodgy.
If we're being serious, there's nothing that a footballer should do that puts anything into the stands from the field.
I mean, if it's vice versa, the guy's getting arrested, isn't he? Let's be honest.
Exactly. Probably. So yeah, but also it's just funny at the same time.
They give so much stick, and I always think this football, they give so much stick. Like eventually you're going to get something back, because your behaviours of football fans, in terms of their mouths and what they shout on, it's fucking abysmal. We all know it. We've all partaken in it, of course, but it's eventually you are going to get it back. But again, it's just funny because obviously they're not used to getting beat off Rangers, really, on the whole, setting on at Parkhead. First time they have fans back in, they're beaten by them.
Barry Ferguson as a manager of Rangers as well.
Manager doing these funny celebrations when it doesn't look like he knows exactly what he should be doing. And then Czerny's, they've done a number on them, and then they're taking the absolute piss out of them. That'll leave a bad taste in the mouth when they'll obviously feel wildly superior. But talking to people who should be superior, Carter Vickers, Johnson, not good today, lads. Very poor.
Yeah, they were both poor. And two players who usually just come up massive for Celtic in these games.
And then like Johnson, poor defensively, but that one at the end for the cross, because it was all on the side. In the last minute, and the way he decides to go to attack the ball to shoot, bizarre. Like what on earth he did? He ends up hitting off like the inside of his leg, and all it needs is like he had time to take a touch. He could have done so many different things, but not letting the ball cannon off the inside of his calf is the one he went for. But
before we finish this game, Adam Ida, like. Kuhn was dreadful in the first half, and I was no surprised to see him come off and Maeda moved out to the wing, but Ida provided very little as well. He, what was it, 9 million? What?
The thing about Ida It's only on occasion I see exactly what I should be seeing all the time.
Yeah.
I always hark back to the last season, the game that I thought, right, I get him, I understand. Kilmarnock at Rugby Park. And like Celtic won, and he was playing up front, and he was playing against the sort of strongest sort of defenders of the teams outside the Old Firm, the guys that relish the physical battle, and he really battered them around that night, back into them. And he had total control of it. I was like, right, now I get it. That's exactly what he should be doing. That's exactly what his size should do. But then on top of that, if you're talking about a £9 million player, you're thinking his touch is going to be brilliant. He's going to be relatively quick at that side. But I've barely seen that since. And he's not a poacher in between the posts either. So it's like, I just don't get what he's going to be. And it says so much that Celtic sold Kyogo, and they've just put they sold his only player that was in his position, and they've just put someone else inside instead of him, and he remains the sub. They're going to be trying to sell him in the summer, would be my gut instinct.
They should do, but bloody hell, who's going to take anywhere near close to what Celtic would presumably want from him? But anyway, I think that's enough, because I did say this was going to be something of a derby special, and yeah, we've dedicated over 35 minutes to two games, so we shall go through the rest of the matches, probably about 10 minutes each, and we will begin after these messages. And let's go to our third game now, which was the 2-2 draw, which took place at Fir Park on Saturday between Motherwell and St Mirren. St Mirren going into a 2-goal first half lead, but Motherwell eventually managed to peg them back thanks to a double from Callum Slattery, who was pretty comfortably Motherwell's best player in this game. And I mean, two very well taken goals. The second one, it should be said as well, that Killie and Phillips, I'm still unsure whether there was maybe a nick off of...
Yeah, I'm trying to decide if this is one of the best goals of the season or not.
Yeah, whether it took a nick off of Liam Gordon or not, because if it didn't, then you're right, it has got to be up there with the best goals of the season as he chested it down and fired it into the corner. But I loved Slattery's first goal as well.
So that.
It does start from a big just punt up from the back, but the way that he gets a better at Gogic, the touch that he takes to get it round, fools the defender, and then the finish outside of the foot into the corner. Brilliant.
And I mean, he's going up against one of the most physically imposing and also physically aggressive centre halves in the league. And he uses his body expertly to get round them, to create the opportunity for himself. And it's such a crucial time. Motherwell had done nothing. They weren't involved in the game whatsoever. They were 2-0 down. So it's like, it's literally just a bit of quality that's managed to drag them back into this game. And they didn't really do anything else out with the two bits of quality that Slattery brought to the game. And he's played all over the pitch for Motherwell, it feels like Slattery. But Wimmer, he sort of coincided with Slattery's return to fitness, with Wimmer coming in. And he seems to have been like, well, you're a number 10, mate. You're going to play in the front three. And he obviously got he set up the winning goal at Ibrox. And now he's spun out these ones. And it's massive because Wimmer's looking to buy time here. He's not had time to get his ideas across. He's got tons of injuries to all his main strikers. So, like, you are basically relying on individual quality to buy you the time that you need to get how you want this to go for Motherwell. And the return of Slattery could easily be the thing that propels Motherwell into the top six. And I think they've got an option on him for another year. So my assumption would be they will be making that happen, and we could see Slattery permanently being a sort of like attacking number 10 or part of a front three going forward under Wimmer.
Yeah, he's a bit of an interesting one in terms of the fact that when he first came into the league, I think he's somebody that Motherwell fans have always tended to quite like. He's very combative. I think his first season, so yeah, he's been here since 2021. I remember his first season, he was like first for fouls won, but also first for fouls given away. Like very kind of Cammy Devlin-esque. Yeah. But he's obviously had his injury problems as well, but I think the longer his Motherwell spell's gone on, he started to develop a bit more. And it makes sense because when he joined the club, he was only 22, 23, he's now 26. That he's developed further forward now. And he is more of a threat in the final third and still while producing that energy. And that kind of fits in well to what Motherwell, or at least Motherwell in the past. I've started to fully get up to grips with what Motherwell's identity is under the new managers. They're trying to going to this more kind of high pressing. But you need the higher tempo up there anyway, even though they're not that much the battlers anymore, but they need Slattery at the top end of the pitch to help put pressure on opposing teams' defences. But we'll get to that in a second in terms of Motherwell's philosophy against St Mirren. But what were you going to say?
No, I'm just saying that it seems like Slattery's almost could be killed two birds with one stone for Wimmer. Like you're saying, because before Wimmer came in, Motherwell were one of the most passive teams in the league, maybe the most passive team.
Statistically the most passive team in the league in terms of their pressing.
And then obviously they've got tons of different types of forward players, and they've got loads of wingers. But with Slattery, it's like you bring him back into the team, and if you put him in that forward position, you know you've got the energy, you know you've got the aggression that you're lacking. So you bring him in. But now we're seeing that, obviously, with Slattery, as you said, developing over the years, he's also bringing that bit of quality in it. So, like, it's in terms of like a returning player for what they're lacking and what the manager's decided that Slattery can bring, it could be like he could have a huge impact on how this season finishes, just as an individual, because of sort of like he can solve quite large deficiencies in that Motherwell team, and for the new manager's style as well. And
just the way that this matched up for Motherwell wasn't that necessarily that great. I don't think if you look at like kind of Wimmer style, like the high press. I've saw a team, like I watched a team close hand try to implement a high pressing style in Scottish football, and the problem sometimes if you come up against a team that is quite direct, and I think you saw it in the highlights.
Lots of them are.
And I think you saw it in the highlights of this one as well, where St Mirren in the early going before, and including in the build up to the first goal as well, got a lot of joy down Motherwell's left hand side, basically in behind the Motherwell defence, with Olasanya being the kind of hardest opponent you can just about play in the league in terms of trying to do that. But it wasn't just that as well. They also, we know what St Mirren are like, the Thunderdome approach that Stephen Robinson applied at Motherwell is still very much alive and kicking, and they just made it difficult for Motherwell to try and play their own type of football, the type that Wimmer wants. And Motherwell, across the course of this game, like only had 5 attempts on goal. Now some of that is getting to good areas and just not managing to create a shot out of it, and that's down to individual player errors. But still, like 5 overall for the 90 minutes, including the fact that they essentially had like nearly 20 minutes of football against 10 men and done like nothing with it at all. Like Olasanya's red card, which I'm sure we'll speak about very soon.
Funny.
They after that, St Mirren kind of looked a bit more coherent. They just set up like, okay, let's try and see out the draw, but we'll still try and do something on the counter attack, and that was an identity that suited them well at that point in the game till the finish. But Motherwell playing against that with the kind of expectation of them going to win the game, and just the way the match had gone to that point, didn't really seem to know what they were doing on that front. And so it was a bit disappointing that it just kind of petered out for Motherwell, and after the red card, they couldn't go and make it kind of a memorable comeback.
Because that was a good favour they got from the referee for that, because it's a bonkers second yellow card. It's just coming together, but very funny.
The only thing I can think is that Olasanya jumps, right, and there's no real need for him to jump, and because he jumps into Casey, you can say he's not in control of his body, and therefore it's perhaps a little reckless or whatever. But what I think is more likely, because I've heard suggestions said this, is that Olasanya had been committing a lot of fouls.
Yes, he made more fouls than the whole entire Motherwell team.
So I think it was that. So having it's a coming together, but because Olasanya jumps into it, therefore if you're going to give a foul, you're going to give the foul towards Casey instead of Olasanya, and it might be just like, okay, that I've now had enough of how many times you have fouled somebody.
Yeah, the accumulation is like badoing together, and then off you have to go. Quite an embarrassing way to get red carded, to be honest. For Olasanya, who's having quite an up and down season, I would say. Olasanya,
I mean, more ups and downs considering what we thought he was coming into it.
I suppose, yeah, and obviously he's got a big period in his season, because obviously he's out of contract, and as always, if one of Hibs, Hearts, and Aberdeen is interested, and that means all of them are interested, and then someone, aka Olasanya's agent, has plucked Eintracht Frankfurt out of nowhere saying that they're interested in it and giving him a. But I'd be really interested to see how Olasanya does. He's one of those players that you think might not work at another team. And as you say, there's more of a period where Olasanya's nowhere near good enough, and then we've got this period, and his rise over the seasons has been in stages where he went from useless, can't get a game for Arbroath, to like, oh, he's actually might be somewhat useful, to like super sub, to almost St Mirren's main man. So he's went through the stages, which might help because it means that it's not been like a meteoric rise, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
There's been stages to it, but it's just about. I feel like if he goes to any of the Scottish clubs, he'll be a squad striker because of his style, because he won't be able to play him behind all the time, but he'll be brilliant to use to be a massive pest, chasing games, using against the Old Firm, using them in derbies or whatever, if it was Hibs and Hearts. So he's just going to be a really interesting guy to follow, as it looks like he's absolutely leaving St Mirren at the end of the season. I like that trio in midfield. I feel like it should work really well.
Phillips, O'Hara and Boyd Muntz. Unfortunately, we don't know at this point when's the next time we're going to see that, because this didn't make the highlights, but Boyd Muntz was stretchered off during the second half, and it looked like he was in a bit of a bad way. He was down for about 5 minutes in total before they took him off, and when he left the field on a stretcher, he was like, there was like a support for it. He had like the head support on. It was like taped across his forehead, and there was something across his neck as well. It's funny because it looked really
innocuous.
Funny as in weird. It looked because it was quite innocuous. Like it was just a throw-in, like a long throw up the park by Stephen O'Donnell, and Iacovitti came in and pushed Watt into the. I think it was Tony Watt. Was it Tony Watt? Yeah, it was. Pushed Tony Watt into the back, and he fell in, and he could have fell into Boyd Muntz as Callum Slattery converged at the same time, and they both kind of banged into each other. And it's just, I've looked at it, there was no replay shown, but I've looked at it loads of times for the original angle, and I think he just I think as he's going down with his head, it just kind of connects with like the torso of Slattery, but there's nothing on the camera that makes it look that bad. But obviously, judging by his reaction, that something potentially serious has happened there. Hopefully, it's just some kind of, I don't know, crick in his neck or something like that. Like a bit of nerve pain or something that's
that seems serious at the time because of where it is. Because that's actually, because as I say, like the Phillips, Boyd Muntz and O'Hara in my head, that has really good balance, and I like it a lot. And there's loads of legs, and there's a bit of ability for means St Mirren can change up the ways that they move forward, because obviously they've got Boyd Muntz to be more than capable of dropping off and taking the ball from centre half. You've got the hard running, like you're saying, the murder ball that Steve Robinson obviously wants. You've got that in Phillips and O'Hara. They've both got a bit. There's quality in all three players as well. I just think that looks to me on paper as what St Mirren's sort of like first choice midfield three, and I don't feel like we've seen it very often this season. But yeah, St Mirren just can't seem to really see games out, and you can see Robinson was pretty frustrated about that at the end, because I think he's coming to the conclusion that it's going to probably cost him his third top six finish in a row, which would be really, really impressive.
Right, let's move on to our fourth match, and that was another one that took place on Saturday. All the games from now on will be the games that took place on Saturday. This one was at Rugby Park, as Killie managed to get a late goal to get a 1-1 draw against Hibs. Fraser Murray cancelling out the Hibs opener, who have just completely blanked. Who scored your
Martin Boyle?
Goal? Oh, yeah, sorry. Oh, of course, sorry. Actually, we should probably start with that. The most... I've never seen a team practice a set piece in training that apparently the end goal of it is that you give your opponents a 4-on-1 up the other end.
It was absolutely mad. And to be honest, Kilmarnock were doing set pieces the whole game. They would not, like, it was never just getting thrown into the box. And I don't know if that's due to the size of the Hibs team, that they felt that they would be better placed to try and work something in the box. And obviously Hibs do have a pretty large team, especially when you add Obita into it instead of Nicky Cadden. So I don't know if that's something they thought. But just to have such a, what's the word? Kamikaze sort of set piece from Derek McInnes. I was just watching it go that. I don't think that's what they practice. I don't think that everyone was meant to be in the box. I don't think that, and I can't remember who it was. Maybe Mayo or Wright, or maybe Brad Lyons actually. Just foul. I had to take a booking on Hoylett. Is it Hoylett that makes the tackle? You just can't let him get the what if again, which makes you think they maybe haven't set up properly, because if he's obviously thinking that obviously if we set up properly, they might not be able to do what they did. But the fact he didn't do that when, as you say, it's very obvious the minute he wins the ball, they're absolutely fucked. And obviously it's like probably the two best players going up the park for Hibs in that environment. Dylan Levitt, who has got a bit of quality, whose passing is good, and he'll be willing to take his time. And Boyle, one of the better finishers, who's got the pace to stretch it. It's like it's worked out ideally from a Hibs point of view. But it's just hard to believe that Derek McInnes of all people would have give the green light to such a high risk kamikaze set piece.
It was Mayo who was the one defender back. I can't remember who it was who got tackled.
And he backpedaled. If there wasn't a goalkeeper there, he would have still been backpedaling now.
Yeah, he did backpedal a little bit too much, but then, as Craig Anderson pointed out, it's maybe not many times you try and coach a player what to do when he's got 4 opposition players just running right at him. So there was 3 changes for Hibs for this one, I believe.
Yep.
One enforced with Jordan Obita coming in for Nicky Cadden, but 2 tactical with Mariah Welsh and Campbell dropping to the bench for Levitt and Hoylett. Without Cadden's kind of delivery to be relied upon, even though Obita, I think, tried 8 crosses in this one, which was joint most in the Premiership.
Obita's good delivery as well. He does have. He does definitely.
But it does seem to me like from the outset this was an attempt to play a bit more football than perhaps in the team's been set up in recent weeks.
That's exactly what I thought. It's like obviously one of Hibs' main attacking outlets, and that's not just on the ball and through set pieces. It's just that Cadden, there's just so many ways that he can impact the game. Also with his ability to score goals as well. He's just a massive attacking outlet for this Hibs team. So I think they decided that they wanted to find other ways that they'd be able to break through the Kilmarnock team. So they decided to go with, rather than the Mariah Welsh, the energy and the pressing ability they need to have, and then with Josh Campbell, which is probably more to do with aerial ability, finishing ability. But again, his ways of playing is quite hammer-like, rather than the sort of like the cuteness and the technical ability of Junior Hoylett in there. I think it certainly it'll be interesting to see what Hibs do going forward when they've got the full squad, because I don't know, because I'm going to come on to what I thought Kilmarnock didn't do right, but with Hibs, it gave Hibs such control in the game, even on a bad surface, because Levitt, like everyone under Gray, it's something the best that Gray's done is that every single player's improved. Every single one has improved. And he's managed to keep the whole squad together, meaning that no one's ever felt, I mean, Dylan Levitt actually came out and said it himself, that he never felt like he wasn't involved even when he wasn't playing. And he said Gray he could tell was being very deliberate on that. And that's obviously something that Gray's done brilliantly well, because so many times at clubs, it's not the done thing. A lot of times managers do like to make a scene and punt someone out and they make sure that everyone knows who has what. But with Levitt and Hoylett in there, they were arguably 2 Hibs' best players over the 90 minutes. And the amount of control and the lack of like Kilmarnock being able to get anyone near hurting Hibs, it felt like such a like professional performance that got undone at the end. I think Hibs wasted quite a lot of really, really good situations. They missed a couple of... They didn't create as many gilt-edged chances as their possession and control you would have expected. The best one being from a Martin Boyle free kick when Bashiri and someone else just completely get in each other's way. And it's an absolute sitter. They're both like, they're queuing up both to try and pop into the net. That was one bit, but I really liked it. And Derek McInnes was talking about Hoylett after the game, and he's another one that's we had to rely on him too much at the start of the season, and now we're able to use Junior Hoylett and Gale, where I'm enjoying them again a lot more because we're using them in the way that they were designed to be used. But the big issue with having Levitt and Hoylett playing meant that to see the game out, Hibs lost the players that they've used quite regularly over the last few weeks to see games out. Obviously, Hearts and Celtic being really good examples of that. Hoylett and Levitt done great jobs coming on in the derby, especially. And Hoylett just bringing a bit of quality, holding the ball in, a lot of experience. Hibs kind of didn't have that towards the end of the game. And so bringing Mariah Welsh and Campbell on, it didn't want to have the same impact, that the sort of ability to hold on to the ball. Hibs maybe lost the impetus a bit when they had to do that towards the end of the game. So there was almost like pros and cons of having to play Levitt and Hoylett in the game, and we maybe lost things that the formation of the team over a 90-minute spell has been really good in recent times. So it'll be interesting to see what Gray does, because we're getting to the stage now where Hibs are pretty much, maybe apart from Nicky Cadden, going to have every single player available to see what he decides to go for in specific games.
So before we move on, what did you think of Killie's performance overall?
I thought they were really bad, and I think McInnes tells a lot out of the fact that how much he spoke up Hibs towards the end, which makes me think that Kilmarnock really concentrated on stopping Hibs rather than they couldn't really cope with the physical aspect to Hibs. Like Craig Anderson mentioned it, and I spoke to him about it. He felt that Hibs defenders were really, really physical, or even off the ball with the forwards, and it didn't seem that, obviously, with them having to play Wales and Kennedy, so Hibs sort of took advantage of maybe Kilmarnock not being as usually physical as they are and tried to impose that on them. But yeah, it seemed like they'd fully focused on stopping Hibs, and they completely forgot about the good things and the good players that they have, and they could definitely hurt Hibs. And it felt like they had no real interest in doing that. It was almost like they just wanted to contain Hibs, which says a lot about maybe where Hibs have been. But I think from a Kilmarnock point of view, and they can expect more from their team. And I know Craig, Kilmarnock, I was surprised at quite how poor and how passive and how much Hibs were just able to dominate, because going to Rugby Park, that's just not normally what you're able to do. But I think McCrory coming back, I know he has his detractors, but he's definitely the best goalie out of him and O'Hara. So and he had a decent game overall.
Speaking of goalies and defences in general, the equalising goal, it's so poor from a Hibs perspective, and
so frustrating. And
it's not just, it's frustrating that Smith, he tries to be too clever. He tries to anticipate where the ball's going. If he stood exactly where it was, the ball hits off his face. But he dives, and it ultimately means he dives out the way of it because he goes right in the centre of the goals from Murray. But at that period in the game, you need as many players as possible in the width of the posts, and you just had too many Hibs defenders that just got distracted by something else and just kind of forgot what the main job was. You get
three of that left Murray in the centre of the goal as well. They both had him, and then they both run away. You're totally right.
There's three players that go chasing the ball after it initially, it's kind of half cleared. Three of them go chasing the ball, and that kind of leaves a bit. But you even see when the ball goes into the back, there's a header one, but behind them there's two players, Hibs players, marking one player. But there's no point. You need to get as many, like I say, you need to get as many bodies as possible in the 6-yard box within the width of the goal. And when that ball was headed back in, I think there was one Hibs player to 3 Killie players. Yeah,
and it's so frustrating because it's been a big part of this sort of incredible run that Hibs have been on is the fact that they have been able to see games out, and that hasn't reared its head for a long period. So again, maybe, as I said, maybe a little bit losing the control with the substitutions. I'm not sure. I'm maybe just making excuses for guys that just made errors at the time, and it just wasn't well. It wasn't well defended. But overall, 14 games unbeaten. Mental. It's incredible. I think it's the best thing since maybe the 40s that Hibs have done in the top flight, which is just so hard to compute. It's hard to compute to me. It's am I watching the best form a Hibs team I've ever seen in my life? Doesn't feel like I am, but I am.
Right, let's move on to our next game, which was Hearts beating Ross County 2-0 at Tynecastle. And I didn't put the goal scorers for each game in front of me. I haven't done it for each one. I keep forgetting who they are. Goals from
Kabangu and
George Grant. I was there. I'm a Hearts fan. What's going on here? But yeah, this was, I mean, to sum it up in like a sentence or two, not a great game by any means of the imagination. It's one that I think everybody's going to forget within minutes of the full-time whistle going. Hearts deserved it, but looked nowhere near their best. County battled well for the most part, but lacked real quality. Anything else you'd like to know, Tony?
Oh, bloody hell, Craig. What about Hearts' shape? They were back in the diamond, were they not?
Yes.
And I know that's been much maligned in recent weeks.
Well, so we've played the diamond the last 6 games. Now, it was first brought in for the Rangers game at Tynecastle, but it worked very well, and the 3-1 defeat was not a reflection on how that match went. So, understandably, it was stuck with for that point forward. But it's got results, and also and it was used in the derby as well, and then went away from it at half-time, and I felt like Hearts made a mistake there. But in the other games, the St Mirren game, when Hearts were poor to begin with, ultimately made the most of a St Mirren error that allowed James Wilson to score, and then Hearts were the better team for that point forward. Dundee game, Hearts were the better side, but I still wasn't really convinced by them then. And there's another match I'm forgetting as well. But away to St Johnstone, where again, Hearts got a result, but far from like impressive in their general play. It just doesn't look like to me it's necessarily working as well as you would want it to. So I understand why Neil Critchley's been playing it. You've got Shankland, you've got Cabangun, you've got Wilson. Shankland's still getting a bit of criticism and stick for the fact he's not scoring much, but he is doing well as the number 10. So he's not really the problem here. The problem just seems to be that overall for the entire structure of the team, maybe it's something just because they've been moved into it late in the season and they've not practiced it a lot. Maybe it's something like the fact there doesn't seem to be anybody at this point in time who looks a natural on the right side of the diamond. Cartoon played again in this one there, showed his quality against Dundee, but it's like it's clear to see for everyone that he is still getting up to speed with Scottish football and getting up to speed with the players he's playing with. On the left side, Spittle isn't playing as well because him and Penrice aren't quite as in sync with each other because he's no longer on the wing properly. And they still have their moments together, but they're playing a bit another 5-10 yards further apart, which is hamstringing then. And I don't know, again, what then that's maybe doing to the defenders, because you've got Penrice maybe with a little less help without Spittle being stood there in front of him. And on the right side, I mean, you play a diamond, your fullbacks provide your width. Gerald Taylor is too much of a bomb scare, basically, to be trusted to play. And I'm not sure about his crossing ability when he does play in matches when Hearts have got to be in the front foot. And Adam Forrester, just at this stage of his career, probably lacks the quality to do it a convincing job. So there's a lot of problems with it. So I'm concerned that Critchley is just looking at results and not looking at performances, because I remember this under the latter days of Robbie Neilson when it was working to an extent. The Hearts were winning, but then when the wheels came off and the results started to go against Hearts, Neilson kept being almost like, well, it was working a couple of months ago because we were winning all these games. It was like, no, it wasn't really working. We were winning in spite of the formation. Please recognise that and please change it. But I was heartened on Saturday because Critchley, for the last 12 minutes plus the 4 or 5 minute stoppage time.
He brought on Drama and Forrest, didn't he?
And he went to a 4-2-3-1, and Hearts were better from that point forward and saw the game out quite comfortably, including getting the goal, and had another couple of good opportunities in that time as well.
Well, one player that is impressive and is simply your best player, Beni Baningime, Fowler. Yep. Tell me all about him.
So I want to give a shout out to Michael Steinvender, who was other than being caused a couple of problems by Ronan Hill immediately after the latter came on, was otherwise excellent at the back. He's been a really good signing.
No Ronan Hill again. I'm going to fucking smash my head against the wall, I think.
So we'll get to counties later. But Steinvender, a really good signing. He's a confident defender, a bit of quickness, composed on the ball. Just so many times it just seemed the attack seemed to go to his side, and he just took care of things pretty much. Other than that aforementioned kind of Ronan Hill issue that occurred right after Hill came on, then he was it was kind of strolled it, as fans always like to say on the forums. Yeah. Like, just get 8 out of 10, strolled it. That's it. No more needed to say. But Beni Baningime, Hearts' best player again by a mile. But you see it as well. He's even creating a bit going forward with a lovely turning pass for the goal. And his defensive work also could have made the highlights with that block of Conor Randall. If he doesn't get there, then Randall's got a free shot and goal within 8 yards. And he's now getting to the stage where he looks as fit, he looks as quick as he did when he first arrived on the scene. It's taken him a long time to properly get over that knee injury, but he's doing so now. And he's playing every single game. He's playing 90 minutes every week. And he's standing out above his teammates in pretty much each and every fixture that he plays in now. His form is, by far and away, he's the most in-form Hearts player of the last 2-3 months. He's just about every single match, he's like 8 out of 10 at least.
There we go. Yes, I think he's simply Hearts' best player. His little snake hips. I just think if you want to be if a team like Hearts, Hibs, Aberdeen, I'll always use them because obviously I understand that people play slightly differently against those clubs. It's just that I feel like you need to have a player like that to open it up. I feel you need a midfielder, especially if you don't want to be overly direct. You need a midfielder who can do that because then the team that you're playing against are normally going to be playing like Ross County were with 10 men behind the ball, etc., etc. So you need someone who's able to sort of be dynamic and create space through subtlety, really. It can't just be, because otherwise you get, if that defensive midfielder who sits in there just wants to do the job of a traditional one where you just move the ball, you make tackles, you try and make interceptions, it's not going to be enough against the teams that Hearts are likely to play in the styles that they're likely to go to come up against. It makes that player in that role actually really, really important. So and you've seen the difference for Hibs. Triantis doesn't play, but that type of player has to, and it's one of the reasons that Hibs were able to move forward and you start winning games, you start buying space, and it means that for Hearts, your Kibangu, Spittle, Wilson, they suddenly get space to operate in because other players have to move to try and stop the fact that they've now been opened up. So it's absolutely massive to have a player of that style. And obviously when Aberdeen were at their best this season, it was Nielsen that done that exact role. So it's very obvious if you look over the three teams in their best periods that it's when those Triantis, Nielsen, or Baningime are at their best. So these are like we have to now start looking at it for like our clubs that these are really, really important positions. Really important. This guy, the style of player that you play in there.
And you talk about that kind of similar style of football, and you could apply Dundee to that, and then it goes back to the chat earlier. Dundee looking at their best with Silla playing well.
But then that and actually doing more than just being a spoiler.
Yeah,
and bringing more. So I think we just need to we need to expect more from our players that play in those roles. And I know it seems a bit unusual because spoilers are thought of quite positively in Scottish football, I would say, guys who play that role. But yeah, you see the massive difference it makes when you've got a guy who has quality and who can dribble and who can be subtle and is able to pass forward. And like you're saying with Baningime now, also able to make telling passes when they drive forward to the ball. So that role just, it can't just be, you can't have stopgap players in there, is what I'm going to say. I think these need to be treated like you would your centre forward or whatever.
Yeah.
That this guy that you're saying, when you sign a player like that, they need to, that player needs to be of a certain standard and a certain style, and they're hard to come by because players like that are wanted everywhere who can actually do more than just sit in a hole and spoil.
Before we move on to the last game, Ross County, I think they had a good performance back to middle in terms of, I think they defended pretty well. I think they competed hard in midfield. They had periods of possession that I typically maybe wouldn't have expected them to have quite so much of it. They didn't give up too many clear-cut chances, especially not until the dying embers of the game where Hearts, where obviously things opened up more, and as I said, Hearts changed shape and were able to be a bit more dangerous. But the disappointing thing for them, I think, would just be the lack of anything they really had in attack to properly worry Hearts. So it was Phillips started up front on his own with Chilvers in behind. Phillips, a lot of running, but didn't have, and had that one kind of run where he went through and I think pulled a shot wide. And there's maybe another one I'm thinking of as well. I think it was him that had the kind of run through where the Hearts kind of defenders maybe backed off. I might be wrong. It might have been somebody else there where the Hearts backed off, and eventually there was a shot that was deflected for a corner. So he put the work in, but he was just too isolated. And with Chilvers having a poor game, he was just not in it at all. It's maybe the quietest I've seen him play because He can be a very frustrating player, but usually at least it makes you
notice him.
Notice him, aye.
Yeah.
But this one, I kept forgetting he was playing. Nisbet was quite poor as well, and then that leaves, like, you've got Kenna and Randall. They're just more industrious players, and you've got two wing backs that are... I mean, Harman's more attacking, but he didn't really do much either, and Akil Wright on the other side wasn't really in the game other than being a defender.
Get shooting, Akil Wright. Come on. That's what you're here for now. You give us a bicycle kick or a long banger or something. But this is... Like, I saw some of the highlights and I noticed a little bit, like, again, come back to the Hale point with Chilvers and Phillips. It's like you're playing Phillips for pressing ability, for running ability, but you're going to play with a low block. So it renders that a pressing ability almost pointless and useless because you're pressing like an arsehole, running about, but there's no one else really doing it behind you. They just pass round you anyway. Yeah. So I would say, is it no better to have the fox in the box, goal scoring striker if you're only going to get a couple of chances? Surely that's better off, unless you're going to play sort of, as I said, more on the front foot, more like impress more as an outfit. I just don't see the point in playing a runner if he's not going to get the support. Pressing's pointless if it's just one guy. It's a waste of time. So I just don't. I see what you're trying to do if you're Cowie, and Cowie's anyone who listens. I really rate Cowie. I think he's shown a lot. He's a guy who impacts games. He's not passive at all as a manager. He's willing to change things up. He doesn't get bogged down in philosophy. Blah 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 blah. But yeah, but that one I just don't get it. And does he want to be able to go long to Phillips? Is that the other thing he wants to do? I just think you've not got the perfect antidote because you're Ross County. So I would just say your percentages are better if Hale's on. That's just how I would view it.
Right, let's move on to our final game. St Johnstone 0, Aberdeen 0. Tony, anything you want to say about this?
God. It might be the thing maybe about Aberdeen in general, but they look like they struggle. There's not enough cohesion in the way that they play, and the way that they get forward. And I always feel like teams can just be quite stuffy against them. And I mean, if you look at even the Dundee United game, for example, they plucked out the 2 goals, and it's like really, really good finish for Nisbet, but they put so many balls in the box and that. Like, Dundee United did have them at arm's length, and I know sometimes it's something exactly what you're talking about earlier about Hearts, when just because you get away with it sometimes doesn't mean that you're doing the right thing. And I think that's the example for Aberdeen now. It still doesn't look right. Still doesn't look like they've got the ability to really put teams to the sword. I was looking at Odi Daba and Nisbet going up against, obviously, their newfound partnership, and Daba seemed to be bringing the best out of Kevin Nisbet recently, but it didn't look like St Johnstone were under any sort of like they weren't under the cosh massively. It looked like both teams almost started settling for a point, going by the 3 minutes of highlights that were available for this. And it's just like, this, do I have to watch this? I suppose I have to if we're going to talk about it, but I don't really have that much to bring to you, if I'm being brutally honest.
I think what you're saying, Aberdeen's spot on. It just seemed like a real lack of urgency and confidence in what they were doing, which, considering the fact that they have been back amongst the goals recently, and I know some of it was against Queen's Park, but a lot of times it doesn't really matter who you're scoring against as long as you are just getting back to it. And it started with the same front four, and it was a front four in that Queen's Park game that looked very much up for it and looked like it was complementing each other well. But again, you're having Kiskinen being hot and cold, as he has been a lot of this season. Morris, again, not looking good from the starting 11. I said in last week's show, I think they should persevere with him in the starting 11. And a lot of that is down to the fact that I think they do need a bit of consistency in selection, but also, who the fuck is behind them? Like, who else are you bringing in? Because if you bring in O'Coll, you have to move over Kiskinen to the other side. So you're definitely guaranteed a shit performance out of him, because usually when he plays on the right, he doesn't play well. And O'Coll himself is showing very little to facilitate even thinking about making that move. And then Pap Gay, he's kind of showing what the difference is for a player, especially a mercurial one like him, what it's like when the team is playing well and everybody's got their tails up and there's a bit more intensity, a bit more urgency about it, just because everybody's just feeling themselves so well and having faith in each other and the system and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And what it's like when you're coming into a team that's struggling. Because in the former, his frailties as a player, which is basically the fact that you can never tell whether he's going to take a first touch or it's going to balloon off him and go 10 yards in another direction. That's almost seen as a kind of eccentricity, like an idiosyncrasy that can be forgiven, because he's still able, because the team's functioning so well, he's then able to get over those little moments, get into the penalty area, do something with his head, do something where he could like take the ball and stretch opposing teams, or just drive at opposing players and take advantage of any space that opens up and really be a kind of multi-tooled menace.
Uh-huh.
But then in games when we're struggling, when it's really passive and they're not doing enough, and then he's relied on more to contribute to the build-up, and then when the ball's bouncing off him, then it's breaking down, and it's a lot more annoying, and fans are getting on your back more. And I think that's what you're seeing with him. And there's just, for a team that had like so many attacking options at the start of the season, they still have those options, but nobody's really playing that well in any sort of combinations.
Or seeing what the combinations that would work. And I know that Jensen's been quite a popular player with the signings that they've come in, because I know the signings have been brilliant, have they? But Jensen seems to be the one that gets the best share. But I still think, I feel like they've killed off one of the best things about their team and the chaos they were able to bring with Devlin and having him off the hook and letting him go into the box all the time and power forward. He's such a difficult player to play against, I imagine, when he's doing that, because he's so strong. He's a really strong runner, and he keeps on coming for more. He'll turn up at the back post. He'll drive. He'll link up, but he's not like the most technically gifted player. But I just think that the team, a player like that coming from the back, is what causes confusion. And then that's what opens up these little doors for other players that they're more cute players to take advantage of.
I do wonder whether that is again kind of down not necessarily a choice of
decided to do.
A choice of Jimmy Thielen, and more the fact that when Devlin's doing that earlier in the season, it is just down to what I was saying earlier. Like, he's just got so much more confidence. He's got more confidence in himself to get on the end of something that's coming to the penalty.
Yeah,
he's got more confidence in his teammate, whoever's got the ball, to find him in the box, and he's got more confidence that somebody will clear up behind him if he makes that run at the box and he doesn't get it and the other team break. And then, so therefore, when you're going well, you're like, oh, fuck it, I'm just going to attack this because I think that something good's going to happen, as opposed to your team struggling. And then it's like, not sure about this. I'm just going to hang back.
Is it worth it? Will I not?
And Devlin's form did go off a cliff before the January window, before Jensen came in.
Yeah, it did. For St Johnstone, I think they'll just be delighted that they're able to put these types of points together, in terms of, like, they can just not shit themselves as well, like defensively. And Balakari, I think, is a manager that you've seen, he's learnt on the job, and I mean that is quite it's quite a big compliment as well, because he came in, he said things, he still brings part of that, but he's brought balance. They're able to play in different ways. Their teams are able to get clean sheets now, where they've still got that. So fair play him, because it wasn't the easiest hand he was given. I mean, he's still going with Barry Douglas as a left centre half. He's about 90 and looks very slow. But Mitchell, Belidis, Fisher seems to have done really well. So, and they're solid in the middle as well now with Sprangler and Holt. I think the problem now is that they lack something up front. Smart. Yeah, so it's like they can't have. But with Griffith maybe and Kimpioka becoming, so he seems to have found his way back into the manager's.
Well, yeah. Enough that he came off the bench in this one. Kimpioka I'm talking about, not Griffith. Griffith, kind of similar performance actually for the two, but Griffith improved as the game went on after he came off the bench, just due to the fact that he clearly looked like he just back for injury, lacking a bit of match sharpness. Might have been exactly the same with Kimpioka. Might have been exactly the same. But considering he was basically left at the team for 2 months because the manager didn't really trust whether he still wanted to be there or not, and then he comes off the bench and puts in a performance where he looks like he can't be arsed. Not sure if he's going to get another chance very soon.
Silly Kimpioka. I don't understand this for players, though. It's like, you didn't get the move you wanted in January, but people were interested in you because you were doing quite well. Why would you throw in the towel? You know, you're not going to be in St Johnstone your whole life. Surely you want the the good deal after it to come. I don't understand. And
it might be a case of the fact that he was just really lacking match sharpness, but it was considering what the narrative has been around him, then that's not the conclusion that St Johnstone fans were certainly jumping to. But look at that front. Talk about that front three. I've said before, I don't like the fact that one plays a bit deeper, but even in the makeup of that front three, like in the makeup of their team in general, in the fact that you've got Graham Carey on the bench still, even after his heroics, you've still got like Nicky Clark on the bench. I think one of these guys at least should be in the team, because I look around their side and they've got Holt, they've got Dre Wright, they've got Duke McKenna, they've got Sam Curtis on the right. And I'm just and it's Sidibe and Kirk as well. That's a lot of hard running. That's a lot of running, and that's
so surely a little sprinkle.
Surely you can sacrifice some of that running. I know it'll be a part of the game plan, but you can sacrifice some of that running for somebody with a bit more guile and a bit more class and a bit more ability, like Carey, to produce something out of nothing. Because yes, you're right. It is good that he's managed to learn the job, and they have got defensively a lot more solid, and they're digging out a lot of points, and that's what you have to do at the bottom of the table. But it is now a 4-point gap. And there aren't many games left. So you are going to have that little bit of sprinkle of quality as well if you're going to get yourself out of this, especially if that's the end of Dundee's bad run. And they're now going to get a bit of confidence about them and start putting some results together. You're going to maybe have to do what they did recently and claw back a big gap.
Because a point's not going to be good enough.
Yeah.
To get you out. So I get where you're coming from there, but at least with Valakari, you feel like he might be able to get points in different games, doing different things, rather than it being, well, maybe we can feast on, like, it doesn't have to be one or the other, Zemo. We can do them for different games, can call for different strategies, even.
Not sure if you've heard of that.
We'll find out very soon.
Right, Tony, that'll do us. Thank you very much for joining me.
It was my pleasure, Craig, as always.
And thank you to everybody for listening and your continued support of the podcast. We will be back again on Thursday. Thank you. Goodbye.